brain communication. From an infant, not only did we learn to communicate through our own language, that twins speak that you often hear that twins have, but we also had a real communication on a deep nonverbal level. And so I was really wired for empathy right brain communication even as a young child. Second, another situation that uniquely prepared me for, I think, this new movement in psychology was my own reaction to childhood. I had a lot of different fears and anxieties. You could almost say I was a phobic child. I had some things that I just seemed like I was always having to overcome something. I was always having to be brave and try to do things. And I fought the fears and anxiety all my childhood. I was functioning only because I learned coping skills involving visualization, mindfulness. I remember doing visualization stuff when I was a kid. And that some would call that daydreaming. Not really, but I mean, I would really remember trying to change things and thinking of things being more positive and stuff like that. And it wasn't until I took my first psychology class, it was in senior in high school, I kind of was laughing, thinking, gee, I know a lot of this stuff already, because that's how I survived. And many of you are probably the same way, We use different things to cope, right? Coping mechanisms. And so I was ready to hear more of it, and I changed my major when I got in college and decided that, psychology was something I already been studying the Bible. It was already in ministry when I went back to finish up in psychology. So I felt the combination of the two was tremendous, and that's the third movement in my life, and that was my personal involvement in Christianity. In psychology today, there's a great acceptance of spirituality, but I'm talking about a personal relationship with God. I'm talking about a God who is there, not just an inner peace, an inner awareness, but a real relationship. God has created us relational. And that's what this is all about. We can't do this by ourselves. We need each other and we need God. And my spirituality then was steeped in Christianity. And by choice, when I was 15, I decided I wanted to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. And that's what I did. And I chose that, and God, because he chose me. And so I decided, and ever since that day, I've been serving him. I've been in the ministry from all my adult life. And my years with spiritual disciplines and still fighting with my own anxiety has caused this combination of Christianity and psychology. I remember when I went to graduate school, they were talking about the different kind of Christian. They actually asked me to give a big lecture to the school on the integration of Christianity and psychology because of the background I had. And then the fourth movement happened about 20 years ago. Just before we started teaching this was this whole new movement of what they call affective counseling or therapy, where they started integrating the brain. What is the brain doing in all the new studies? And we know already that some things are changing. We're finding out more. And that's why I love keep studying. And each year we'll add and take away and do whatever. We'll try to keep current. But the good news is that, to me, all the study of the brain points to a masterful design, a magnificent brain that opened up the possibility of a spirituality that we can have with a creative designer. And it validated what I always thought was exciting about Christianity. We can have a relationship with a God who loves us and is vitally involved in our life. And so we came up with this, 15 years ago or whatever, started teaching and been adding to it every year. So why emotional relearning on the bottom of page 1 there? The Bible teaches that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. In the last 30 years, science has learned how the brain and memory work hand in hand in shaping behavior. And in emotional relearning, we use the biblical principles and applied neuroscience to help us learn and regulate our emotions. And science teaches that many of us do not have the resilience needed to return to peace and joy from painful emotions. Instead, we struggle with the ability to regulate our emotions. And when that happens, we turn to substitutes, don't we? Different things to comfort us. And it's really changed the way that we look at addictions, the way we look at some of the negative behavior patterns. And so we can apply a lot of this to help us combat the cravings and urges. And so in the middle of our course, for those of you that haven't been here, we talk about habits and things so we can really kind of combat that. And so emotional learning, what is emotional learning? Now I'm going to describe here a negative emotional learning because that's usually what triggers us. That's what triggers us. But in a sense, what's going to overcome it, the relearning, is going to be a positive emotional learning. And so we need both. But I want to start off telling what is an emotional learning. The emphasis in psychology for the last 30 years has been cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and there's been all kinds of variations of that. But it's basically on what are we thinking? How do we change our cognitions and the thoughts that we have? But I found and realized and believe that it isn't just what we think, it's how emotionally we learn these things. That's why it's so hard. And I always use the example of a person that is beautiful or good enough, let's say good enough, and yet they feel they're ugly. How do you combat that? How do you try telling someone that really believes they're ugly that they're good looking? That they're good enough. And it's just all this other stuff gets in the way. Somewhere they emotionally learn that. And it's a felt belief. It's not even a cognitive belief. And in fact, I said that in the email that I sent out. If I was to ask any of you here, hey, are you stupid? And I would watch the way I said that, I might have to duck if I say it the wrong. Are you stupid? But hopefully, and I would think, looking around, everyone here would say no. And you would have ways to prove it. I did good in school. I mean, logically, I'm doing this at work. Am I smart in everything? No, but I'm smart enough. And yet, if I asked you, have you ever felt stupid or were made to feel stupid? Chances are, many of us would say, well, yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that we are, but a lot of times that stuff sticks with us. And it's not that we're going around, oh, I'm stupid. No, it's when we get triggered, when someone gives us that certain look. When we were made to feel stupid, it was, what's wrong with you? Are you stupid? I can't believe you did that. We see this? See? All right? So later, when someone comes up to you like this, you're already halfway down the road, right? We're already down there. We already got the stupid sign, whatever, And that was an emotional learning. And here's the thing. We won't even stop to think it. We won't even probably think of the word stupid. Our body will take over. All of a sudden, it's like this. And we're going, we're there, And we cognitively, that's why awareness, emotional recognition is so important, because if we can name it, we can tame it, see? And so we're going to talk a lot in here. How do we emotionally relearn then? How do we change something that's so ingrained in us? And that's why a lot of times we have to do it when we get triggered, okay? And that you've been hearing that all year long, right? And we're going to continue to repeat that. But I wrote this a while ago, and I'm pretty sure I went over it with you before, but I only wrote this year, so it's fresh. And if we went over it before, well, that's good, because now we maybe really get it, okay? But this part here is what is an emotional learning, okay? And I said there's 5 parts to an emotional learning. The first is there's an emotional experience, okay? Now, when we think of learning, we usually think 1 and 1 is 2. Now, that's not too emotional. It's not got a lot of emotional. But if you were trying to think of a math thing and an answer to a math thing, and your friends were around you, and you're all trying to think of it, and hey, who's going to get the answer first and all this stuff, there can be, when you get it, aha, I got it, that can be an emotional experience. It's not that will linger with you. 1 and 1 plus 2 won't be, real wonderful to you. But a lot of times what I'm talking about is there has to be an emotional with the learning, and negative emotions carry. So there's an emotional experience. Because it's emotional, it's usually accompanied by an emotional feeling. These emotional feelings cause an emotional belief. which creates an emotional fear. And when this fear is realized, it results in emotional alarm. So what I'm taking is this amygdala overactivation, this alarm, this trigger, and I'm breaking it. I'm slowing it down, all right? We're slowing it down where we can see it, all right? So let's look at emotional experience. Look at the following list of emotional experiences and circle ones that you felt before. Now, for me, I put being labeled, misunderstood, unappreciated, disapproval of, and shamed. And that's just in my marriage. So, no, I'm teasing. No. But anyways, I'm glad my wife ain't here. No, but seriously, those are some of the ones that I've experienced and that have kind of stuck with me, okay? And trust me, I don't get that from my wife, if you know my wife at all. So those are some of the things. Why don't you take a minute here and kind of look at some that maybe you felt. The words kind of carry a meaning to you. And I'm sure I'm missing quite a few. So if you want to be a co-author and you want to add some and give them to me later, I'd be happy to add them to here. But there's just plenty of them, right? But some that you've experienced. Look at B, emotional feeling. Now there's an experience. Okay, I was mocked. Let's take that one, mocked. That's the emotional experience. Do you think being mocked could cause some kind of emotional experience with you? Now, to some of us, it becomes a norm. You know, if we're in a home that's sarcastic, a home that mocks each other, pretty soon we can kind of be defensive and everything. But the original ones, and even still, it hurts, okay? So look at some of the emotional feelings, and I've kind of have them. There's a fear, line. There's an anger, and alone, isolated kind of thing. Take a look at now. I put fear was one, of course, and panic. Uneasy. I had quite a few in that column. I've felt anger before over things, disgusted, afflicted, miserable. And then I also, that shame and remorse, that guilty, that's been big with me in the past, broken, regretful, embarrassed. I just kind of, I should have circled the whole thing, but those are some of the ones that I've kind of experienced. Go ahead and circle some for yourself. All right, let's, on an exercise, share a time when you had an emotional experience. What was it, and what emotional feelings accompanied it? You know, were you embarrassed or humiliated? I remember my dad. My dad never really played jokes on us or anything, but this one particular time, I was older. I was probably 15, 16, working in a lumber yard with him. My dad was a foreman there. And after, you know, when the 4:30 would come along, we'd all get near the punch clock, right? And it's a warm day. We're all outside waiting for the punch clock where we punch out. And my dad was working on a big forklift. It was a huge Hyster forklift. And he was doing it. He had the hood up on it. And he asked me to go in there and touch the spark plug wire. You know, I thought I was helping him, right? And so I did that, and he cranked it. And I mean, it just knocked me about 10 feet on my butt. Now, a couple things happened. Frank and some of the others were laughing their heads off at me. It humiliated me, embarrassed me. I couldn't figure out why my dad did that. To this day, I'm not sure he knew neither. It also caused me to be angry with my father, but I'd learned to bury that anger because my dad was a pretty tough guy. But it caused in me somewhat to be a little more embarrassed around the yard and going back to work, and it caused some things that I had to overcome that I did eventually talk to my dad about, and because I let it build up a lot of anger in me. So I don't know, that's just something. But maybe you have someone at the table. Not everyone has to share, but maybe someone has a story, maybe not that severe, but something else that maybe kind of set you on a certain path or made you a little cautious. Maybe you've overcome it by now. That'd be a great one you could share. But just see if there's something at the table there. We'll give you a few minutes, okay? Excuse me. All right, take about another minute. All right. So there's been some good discussion. Well, we're going to have another exercise in a few minutes so you can continue. You know, I think fear is a big one. Fear would be, something we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but a lot of times, someone with, if you experience someone in a family or someone with irrational behavior, you never know that can cause, some kind of wondering what's going to go on or inconsistent behavior, right? Intimidation can do it. Accidents, right? My wife was in it didn't really do much damage, but the car came out of nowhere and it scared her and it kind of brushed up against her and they took off. But later, I'm driving with us a couple days later and she's still feeling a little bit of it, Here again, these are associations. Associations. When a behavior happens, and an emotion happens, there's an association. But what's the tricky part is, what do we associate with it? We can say, yes, if A happens, B's going to happen. I'm going to have this emotion. But let's look at the next one here, the emotional belief. If it's a strong enough, right, and you felt the way you did, then what were you believing about yourself? Because that's, maybe there was a belief put on you. Let's go back to the person that doesn't feel that they look good enough. Maybe mom was combing the hair and saying, oh, man, I'm using my own. I had 2 colics, right? My mom would try to, get it down and everything at once. And I remember the comments she made about my hair, and I told her, well, someday I'll fool you, No, anyway. But it, made me a little self-conscious, but I can't imagine with all the body shaming that women go through. And what I'm finding out, I mean, I've known it for a long time, but my grandchildren help. Children listen. They hear everything. And, we have so many what we think are private conversations between our spouses or whatever, or another friend. We're on the phone, and we think they're not hearing it. They don't have the ability to rationally think about what you're saying. They're making up their own mind. My example, my son, not too long ago, he's a respiratory therapist, so with COVID, you can imagine what he's been going through and watching people get real sick and some die. And he mentioned something about, he has MS, and he said something about, he made a joke to me, oh, I'm going to die or something. Well, his son was sitting across the room and all of a sudden screamed, Dad, he goes, no, son, I didn't, I was just, so he had to comfort his son to assure his son that he wasn't dying, Well, these things to a child's mind can really have interpretations. And so what do we believe? When those things happened, you felt the way you did, what were you believing about yourself? And so circle some of these self-beliefs. Ask yourself, have I felt this way before? I don't deserve love, right? The ones I had, I'm worthless, I'm shameful, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough. That one, a lot. I don't deserve good things. Man, I don't know where that one came from, but I've had that one. I'm broken. I've had the I'm stupid, I'm insignificant. Now, do I concretely, intellectually believe a lot of these things? No, but have I felt them? Have I felt this way before? And that's why these are felt beliefs, emotional beliefs. And so, and here again, it doesn't mean it's across the board. It could be in certain circumstances. I'm unimportant. And you can be going along, and then at work someone says something or does something, and boom, all of a sudden, you're right back when you were 5 years old, right? So go ahead and look at some of those and see. Here again, you're not admitting that these are true. Because I don't want you to, right? I mean, I could tell you right now, these aren't true, but have you felt them? Okay, that's the important part. That's what we're fighting, okay? That's what we're going to try to overcome. If we can name it, we can tame it, not claim it, tame it, all right? Let's get it right. All right, why don't you take a minute at the table, and if you feel like sharing, share one or two maybe that you've experienced, okay? Not necessarily that you believe, but that you've experienced feeling that way before. Why don't you share around the table? Maybe there's, some of you have experienced some of those things. And let me say this too. If you have, you're not alone, okay? And you're not defining yourself, okay? So rejoice in that. You're not alone. There's hope. This too will end, okay? So go ahead. Take about another minute. All right, let's go ahead and continue. Now, you notice that I called these emotional beliefs, okay? And a lot of times you'll hear me talking about lies because I believe these are lies, okay? But they're beliefs. And here's the thing, a belief won't hurt you as long as no one knows about it, right? Or you're not in a way to be exposed. And so a lot of times it lays dormant and we don't think too much about it. Other times we have the shadow self and we're very aware of it and we're trying everything we can to not expose it. And what happens is that emotional belief can lead to an emotional fear. And that's D, right? What are the perceived consequences of this belief? And the key word there is perceived, okay? Here again, this is where the association comes in. The brain starts making associations. If I'm this, and then this happens, look what's going to happen. And so let's read the example. You may feel that you're no good at sports, and it may be true. But there's no consequences to that belief if no one's around to watch you play, right? When we have to play in front of others, we start to fear what they might believe. Thoughts like, I'm a loser, or he's a loser, right? Or I'm a klutz. Everyone will think I'm stupid. These kind of thoughts result in a spiral, negative consequences that we fear. Each one has a cause and effect. We start to feel if I'm stupid, then no one will like me, right? Or if I'm a klutz, then everyone will mock me or laugh at me, right? And so that starts now this fear part. This is where the amygdala gets involved, the limbic system, right? This is where the association starts coming in that says danger, danger. And this is where when we felt this insignificant, when we felt some of those things, or actually it goes back to the experience. When we experienced those things, we felt a certain way, we tied a belief to it, or maybe it was told to us, and we started right then, the brain started saying, okay, what was the tone of voice? What was the look on the face? What was the circumstances? And we start making associations because of this emotional fear. We don't want to be involved in something that's fearful. There's an aversion to that. And so here are some of the things that we can fear, right? I'll be rejected. I'll be humiliated. I'll be forsaken. Now, it's interesting, humiliation can cause us then to later, what? Fear of being humiliated again, right? And so you'll see that some of these are redundant. I'll be forsaken. I'll be left out. I'll be abandoned. Now, for me, humiliation, rejected, and abandonment was big. For me, I'll be made fun of. I used to, every once in a while when I have to pronounce certain words, I trip over them. There's this dyslexia of mine kind of played out in pronunciations and stuff. And I had a lazy tongue, so I didn't do my L's. So instead of school, I'd say school and cool and things. And I remember being young and the kids at the bus, Susan Reese lived down the street. Yeah, I said your name, Susan. No, anyways, but she used to go to the bus stops. Hey, Ron, say cool, and so I only lived 2 doors from the bus stop, but on the way, I would come up with a self-deprecating joke about myself because I figured at least I could control the laughter. And I learned to be Chuckles the Clown and, do some kind of thing about myself where, I could be the object of their laughing, but the joke was kind of on them because I controlled it, And I could take it as long as I was making fun of myself. What really hurt was if someone else was making fun of me. And so that fear kind of drove me to be that kind of self-deprecating kind of things. But I didn't want to be found out as a loser. And so I'll be rejected. I'll be humiliated. I'll be abandoned. I'll be yelled at. I'll be shamed. I had another, I'll be punished. But that punishment was a big one with me. We used punishment in my house pretty big. And I'll be unlovable. And so those were some of the things that I feared. And when you start putting it together, this is where it starts going. So why don't you see it? Were there any of those that you've ever experienced or maybe still think that you have an aversion to, or you've experienced maybe in your adult life here, sometimes when you've avoided these things? So why don't you just go ahead and circle that. And then when that's done, go ahead and exercise this. Share around the table maybe if you felt some of those things, okay? All right, take about another minute. All right. Let's look at that again because we're going to continue here, but we got to remember a lot of this is perceived consequences, okay? It's a perception. For example, one of them was, I will be yelled at. Well, have you ever had someone yell at you that you don't know? You know, you're going down the highway and maybe you swerved or something. The guy goes, "Hey, what kind of idiot are you?" You know, and you just feel like saluting him back or something, you know. And you don't care, you know. You don't let it bother you, right? But yet someone else yells at you, and all of a sudden, you know, you're upset, right? It carries more weight. That's a perception. Now, granted, if it's your boss, it could lead to some consequences, right? But on the other hand, a lot of times these things are exaggerated. These come out of childhood. This is that inner child of us that's going, ah, which gets us to the next one, E, the emotional alarm. And I've taught this before, but this is, you know, it's easy for me because I've been teaching this, right? Some of you are hearing this maybe only for the second, third, fourth time, maybe the first, right? And don't feel bad if it takes a while, but what are the perceived results if the perceived consequences were true? So otherwise, I'll be humiliated. Well, we want to stop there. Like humiliation is the end of the game. And it is, in a certain degree. So you are humiliated. You'll get over that, right? I mean, you can talk yourself off the wall. I mean, it's not the end of the world. But the trouble is it's associated with an alarm. And let's talk about that. You know, see, fear doesn't come from the perceived consequences of the self-beliefs by themselves. It may feel that way, but it's the result of those perceived consequences that frighten us to the core. When you look at the list of D, right, those emotional fears, what are some of the results of those consequences that would fear us so deeply? Why would our amygdala, the alarm go off? Why would we all of a sudden be anxious? Why all of a sudden would we be depressed? Well, remember, a lot of these beliefs, consequences, perceived results come out of childhood. They're not the result of rational thinking. Unfortunately, the brain isn't always rational. It learns by associations, and sometimes there are childish beliefs attached to it. We must use our rational brain and rethink the truth and emotionally relearn the new association. Now, while the beliefs and their consequences can be seemingly endless, there are only so many catastrophic results that can happen to us. They are similar and carry a significant fear to the human species. I will die is perhaps the most prevalent. It is a result that scares us deep to the core of our being. The others are similar variation of the theme. That's why I like to cut to the chase. When confronted with a negative belief or perceived consequence, I dismiss it by saying this is a false alarm based on faulty wiring. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die if you don't like me. I'm not going to die if I lose this job. Well, maybe, no, but, you know, but seriously, I mean, how many things are we really going to die from, right? God's in control of that part, right? The majority, but that's the trouble with the alarm. It's not there. It doesn't have a volume control. It's not. Oh, that was just a little alarm. No, it's not. You know, it's an alarm. Yeah, my son and granddaughter mock me all the time because my brother edits my videos, right? So I was on vacation with him a couple weeks ago, and all I kept hearing was, you know, and they're okay, you know, thanks. I think they recorded it, you know? But that's the nature of an alarm. That's it. I told you about the carbon monoxide one, and I, even though it was a defective alarm, we proved it was defective. I still had to check it one more time. Alarm is an important thing. It's there for a purpose, and that amygdala going off really sends us into a tailspin. And so the way we tame it is that we recognize it's a false alarm. It's faulty wiring. We need to replace it. If you were home cooking and the smoke detector kept going off and there's no smoke, sooner or later, you'd want to get rid of. By the fifth time it was interrupting you while you're cooking or eating, you'd say, that's nuts. We're going to replace it. Well, that's what we need to do here. This constant turmoil that we experience, this constant overreaction, if we're over-emoting to a situation, 99.9.9, we're somewhere there's faulty wiring going on. And you got my permission to say this is a false alarm based on faulty wiring. I am not going to die. And that will give you plenty of time. You'll find out if you're going to die or not. You still got time to react, all right, if I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong at all, right? I mean, we need to somehow get the prefrontal cortex back online. And the only way that's going to do it is if we realize and start to believe, I'm not going to die. I mean, there's something I've taught this, and people all over the place tell me how they use it all the time. And it's, so I have some others. I'm not going to be annihilated. The one that really worked for me, that changed a lot of me, was the non-being. I could never put my finger on it. Could never put my finger on it. One day I ordered a book, and I got the wrong book. Same title, different book, but the book was supposed to be on adoptive children, what happens when you adopt children, and it was all about the primal wound, it was called, the primal wound, and it talked about the wound that happens to children that have been abandoned and stuff like that, and a lot of times it causes issues later, so it was an attachment issue. So I thought I ordered the book, and when I did, I said, oh, they got a new cover, so I ordered it. Well, it comes, and all of a sudden the preface is talking about alcoholism, and I thought, oh, they're working in alcoholism too. Well, I was doing addiction, so I thought, this is great. And I kept reading. Pretty soon I realized this is a different book. It's talking about a different primal wound, but yet they were very similar, childhood wounds. And they asked people, when they get ready to drink, what are some of the reasons? What do you feel? And how do you explain it? And how do you put a word on it? And the list came, another list, and then they came to that explanation, and they were going this, and one put the fear of non-being. And it sent electricity right up my back. Because for years I was trying to figure out for myself, because I felt like there was a pit. There was a pit behind me. And if I wasn't careful, I was going to fall in this pit, and it was just going to go down. And I remember in my depression, as I pictured myself trying to climb up this slippery wall. And I remember thinking in my own imagination, I don't even know how deep. I was too scared to see how deep this pit even was. And when I came to realize that fear of non-being, and the Lord started working in my heart, and I did some work, emotionally started relearning, I'll never forget that one day I did this visualization with the Lord and everything, and all of a sudden there was the pit. And I was thinking I was doing a whole thing on God's love for me, God's love. And I remember seeing the pit, and I could see the bottom. And I got so excited because I could never see the bottom. It terrified me. I saw the bottom, and all of a sudden I got on my knees, and I started pulling this dirt in there, and I said, God's love, God's love, God's love. And I remember I just kept piling on, and then I stood up in my imagination, and I was scared I was going to pat it down. And I thought, well, what if I jump in there? But by faith in the Lord's love, and I never, ever experienced that pit again. God, let's give God a hand for that one. That was a real emotional, that was an emotional relearning, okay? That was a strong emotional relearning for me, that God controls the pits. That fear of non-being was one that got me. So these are the things, and sometimes we can't name it even. But you see the difference? Do you see how all of a sudden it's like this annihilation, something that we dread? It's a horrible dread. And the good news is, it's not true. God controls that paragraph. That's in God's hands. And he's made some pretty strong promises to us about our eternal life. Nothing can pluck us out of his hand, about his great love for us and his protection. And that's why I'm so excited about God being part of this, because a human being can't necessarily do that for us. But our God can. And he can help us with those deep things that we fear. And I don't know what it is for you, but these are the things that scare us. And so we need to take these and give them back to God and put those in his hand. Fill up that pit, if you will, with his love. So take a look at that exercise there. And this is the hard part, but if you can get in touch with what you're believing when you're fearful, you can counter it with logic. Ask yourself, when I had the emotional experience feeling in self-belief that I mentioned in the last exercise, what was the accompanying alarm? What was I thinking would be the catastrophic event? What do you think a child feels when their dad comes to them in a rage and a horrible thing and slaps them and hits them? I mean, the person that's supposed to take care of them. That becomes a primal wound. You see, that becomes a primal fear. When my mom came home and said, say bye to your dad, you'll never see him again, right? That threw all this kind of abandonment issues. I couldn't put my head around that. I wasn't old enough to say, well, I'll just take my belongings and be on my own, you know? Although I did run away a little bit, but you know, it's just, you don't have time for that. A child instead incorporates it and it becomes this fear. And I become a people pleaser because I would do anything to keep my dad and mom around, you see. It must have been something I did, you see. So that's the illogic logic, right? So why don't you share a little bit? Is there any of those? And maybe not, maybe this is so new to you, you've never really thought about it. Maybe you just need to think of, maybe you need to say, Lord, maybe you're too afraid to think about it. If I was sitting where you were before I knew this stuff, right now my heart be beating because it raises some anxiety in me. I don't know that I'd want to know it. I'd just soon be oblivious, you know. So if that's you tonight, you got my permission to be that way, okay? Just take a deep breath, relax. The Lord will help you in your own time. We can always talk about it privately, okay? So go ahead. Let's do this, though. Let's take a break. It's already 8 o'clock. Let's take a break, come back at 10 after. We had beverages back there. The bathrooms are around the corner. Let's just take a break. This was kind of heavy. All right? Would you say? So take a break for a few minutes. Is it on? There we go. All right. Okay, well, a couple of weeks ago we talked about the Holy Spirit, and I encourage you to, if you don't have a spiritual time in the morning to talk with God or read the Bible, or start doing it, even if it's just 5-10 minutes or something. But start talking, saying, Lord, what do you want me to know about myself? Lord, what do you want me to believe about myself? Is this true? Start talking, seeing if God can't. Because here's the thing, God trumps a lot of these things. You can have an emotional relearning. When you believe something about yourself and someone else comes along and contradicts that and tells you something positive, it's hard sometimes to believe that. But if you start hearing it enough, or the person's really an authority, someone that's powerful in your life, and they say it, that can be a whole emotional relearning. And so there's two ways that we'll emotionally relearn. Some is a slow way around the block. It's going to be repetition. It's going to be, yeah, I believe you, but boy, sure don't feel right. Yeah, okay, maybe now, Others is going to be, man, all of a sudden I had this epiphany, or God just spoke to me, or man, I get it now. But the thing is, we need to start fighting some of these lies, okay? And you can call them beliefs, but I'd rather call them lies, okay? I know I call them beliefs because that's how we start, but they're really lies. And if we can start recognizing it, why would we want to believe them? And again, I say this ad nauseum in here, I know probably every one of you would be kind and compassionate to someone else that you love if they were believing negative things about themselves. You would probably try as hard as you could to convince them that, hey, that's not true. What are you talking about? You're not ugly. You're not stupid. You're not this. You're not that. Why? Because you love them. You have compassion, and it's true. You're not just making it up. Well, then we got to do it for ourselves. And we've got to start finding others. And some of us are in toxic relationships all the time. We need to start finding other people that can help us. And then we need that relationship with God that can really, really start to do it. And so a lot of times what we taught early in the class, it was, when something happens, you recognize, something's going on. You ask yourself, what happened? What's happened? What am I feeling? What am I believing? And what's the truth, right? What's the truth? And that's the next part. Because what we want to do, the emotional relearning, is the truth. See, we've emotionally learned some of these lies, okay? And when we start to see these things that I'm not going to die, when we start to see those things, I'm going to die, I'm going to believe it. When we start to believe the truth, then we start getting changed. That's an emotional belief. And so, for example, when we think, oh, I'm going to die, it's all this, and, you don't even finish the sentence. All you know is that you're highly elevated. Well, then when you come out and say, I'm not going to die, you see, and you really start to believe that, you're retraining the brain. That's an emotional experience. And it may be a small one, but those add up. It may be a big one, and you don't need any more. But the thing is, I've said it before, we have a negativity bias. We have a negativity bias. God created it in us to help us, right? You go walking in the woods, it ain't the wildflowers that are going to kill you, right? It's the snakes or the bear or the thing. And so we constantly look at the negative things more than the positive, and the brain filters through the positive. That's why you need to hear the positive things 7, 8, 9, 10 times. They need to be emotionally learned. And it's not just good enough to repeat them, with the old joke on Saturday Night Live. I forget the guy's name, but he goes, I love myself, and I'm not, all that, that's how we used to teach some of that stuff. But, that alone isn't going to do it. That helps. Positive affirmations are good, but it's when we believe the affirmations that it really makes a difference, all right? So let's look at the bottom of page 4 here. In order to change, we need to take a closer look at the emotional beliefs. We can do this by focusing on when we believed it. Examine the situation and reevaluate from a mature perspective whether it is true or not. We want to know the truth. We can also bring in other evidence, whether it's previous experience or beliefs others have of us. We can allow ourselves to hear truth from God and His Word that would contradict our false beliefs and support a new one. When we come to the truth this way, it's emotional. It's an emotional learning, okay, relearning. And so on page 5, in order to emotionally relearn, we need to go through the 3 phases, okay? And let's skip to half. There are 3 phases, right? The first is emotional recognition. We need to be able to stop and realize our emotions. This usually starts as a sensation. We need to be sensitive to what's going on in our body. This will give us the clue as to what we're feeling, right? So we start to feel, maybe tight in the head, maybe the chest, maybe it's a breath, maybe it's just this panic feeling going, through our body, right? And then, we need to regulate it. So we recognize and we regulate it. Now, why do we regulate it? Number one, we can't think when we're in that elevated emotional state. So nothing's going to change. What we need to do is stop and say, we need to regulate. We need to say, and that's where this is a false alarm. I'm going to ride the wave, right? So you ride the wave. It's just an emotion. It just comes up and goes down right through our body. There's no, we do things to let ourselves know that this is a false alarm. And now if we do it with breathing, right? We take a relaxing breath. We do some positive affirmations like, nothing, God's here. Whatever it is, I've been working with one young girl that's got school phobia, and we're practicing some of these things. And how do you get in there? This big fear, how do you overcome some of that? And part of it is regulating it as it goes on. Because here's the thing. Once we start doing that, we're retraining the brain. Remember, it was an association, the plasticity of the brain, right? That it's malleable, that things that fire together, wire together, right? We've created these well-worn pathways, right? We've created these well-worn pathways, and in order to overcome them, we need to make other pathways that will compete with it and extinguish. When we quit using this pathway and start using this one then starts extinguishing. And so we then have a new belief system. And so that's what we're trying to do here. As we regulate it, we're retraining our alarm that, hey, you shouldn't be going off. There's nothing dangerous here. And we're teaching it, and pretty soon the amygdala starts figuring that out. Because the brain's object here is to conserve energy. It's not going to just continue to give you an alarm if there's nothing to be alarmed about. And so we need to reteach it, right? The third ER is emotional relearning, and that's where we're at now, right? This is when we return to now this is a specific way. We're going to be talking about memories here in the future, and I want to kind of just wet our whistle a little bit here in the remaining 10 minutes that we have. A lot of times these things came out of childhood, and there's memories where we felt this way before. And then when we can go back to that, much like I went to that memory where my mom said, say bye to your dad, you can see him again. I went back to that memory. I invited Jesus into that memory because that fear of abandonment and all that stuff was going on. And I've told you the story before where I pictured myself in there. I pictured little Ronnie in there. I brought Jesus in, and he sat on a couch with his hand kind of back like this and real comfortable. And here again, that was fine with me. That's who I am, right? And I remember I said, well, are you going to leave me too? And then here again, it was my imagination. I was visualizing this, and Jesus just kind of said, I ain't going anywhere. Now, I know I'm not trying to be sacrilegious. I'm not saying that's how Jesus would speak. My English teacher certainly wouldn't think he would, but that's how I speak, at least back then, and ain't covered it for me. When he said, I ain't going nowhere, that was my language. That's what I needed to hear. And he said it with this calmness, man, and with this authority. And it was really, really powerful. Now, I'm not saying you'll have that experience, but that's going back to a memory that was really important. And I brought the Lord into it. I brought myself into it. I was able to tell little Ronnie, hey, come on, let's mature. We got to quit this. Get your hand. I remember saying this. I pictured the bus, right, with the alarm, the brake, and I remember doing this exactly. I went like this. All right, come on. Let go of the alarm. We're okay. We're okay. And I started retraining. And I might as well tell you the rest of the story. I've told you that part before, but it wasn't too much long after that. I was sleeping in bed, and it was around 4:30 in the morning. And all of a sudden, I pictured little Ronnie coming up to the bed. We had a California King water bed. Not at that time, but we had one. And I used to wake up with all my kids in the bed, and we weren't touching one of those things, And I remember him asking, "Can I come up in the bed?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And I remember I grabbed him and I did like this. And it was this integration of my little self and me that was just really, really incredible. Now, I'm not saying your experiences are going to be the same, but what I am saying is that we need to retrain that part of ourselves. We need to retrain. We got to remember some of these things came out of childhood. Some of these things came when we overheard things or when someone said something, and no one goes through life unscathed. No one. And we need to start saying, okay, I need to retrain this part. It was wrong, okay? And God can help us. And so what we do here is when we eventually get to it, one of the ways I'm going to teach is that we go to a memory. And so let's look at the second part here on page 5. Become aware of body sensations or those over-emotional moments that give you a cue that you are reacting to something more than a single circumstance you're in, okay? So I want you to start keeping a journal. Now, I'm not going to check up on you, all right? I'm not going to grade you. You don't have to bring it in. But if you really want to start doing some work on this stuff, then start catching some of the times you're over-emoting, all right? And then, one way we're going to learn how to redo it is that we go back to that thing and say, okay, what happened, right? And so when we repress feelings, our body gives off cues that help us know that something is not the way it should be, cues that remind us to trade our feelings for the truth. Well, what are some? It could be pain, uneasiness, depression, agitation, excessive tiredness, anger, worried, shame, striving, perfectionism, a critical spirit. These are all cues to when we need to seek God's truth about our situation. What's going on here? Why am I behaving this way? Why am I thinking this way? Why am I feeling this way, right? And then what we want to do, if we're going to really get into the relearning process, is when we're ready, we get into a relaxed position. We give the time to God. We begin with remembering a time when we felt close to God or someone else. Because for some of us, God might not be that close to us right now, but maybe there's a grandma or an aunt or a teacher, someone you felt close to. And you want to visualize that because what you're doing is you're opening up the emotional circuits there. And sense that peace and joy when you were in that situation, right? Let it well up a sense of gratitude. The goal is to bring that rational part of the brain back online and prime the mind for hearing from God, right? And then the emotional learning part is think of a recent time when pain, uneasiness, depression, whatever it was, happened, okay? And what you want to do is you want to ask yourself, when did I feel this way before, okay? And you can do that with a present thing as well, as I put on the bottom, right? So let's say last week you had a time at work where you got all worked up, and you were all afraid you were going to get fired, and you were worked up, and you just felt humiliated or whatever. You can go back to that and say, okay, what was going on? What was I feeling? What was I believing? Now, it's hard to correct that right then, but maybe earlier on there's a belief that you came up with. So you can ask yourself, All right, you focusing on that, you're feeling, what did it feel like? What, here I was all up in the chest, I was all tight. Let your body go back to a time when you felt that way before. That's the clue. I'm way ahead of myself. We'll get into this more as the weeks go by. There's a signature, I believe, to these things. And you'll see that if we started when we were young with this embarrassed feeling over, or I'm going to die kind of thing because when someone looks at me a certain way, then that's happened over and over. Even though we're avoiding it, we've had that feeling multiple times. And now we're having it as an adult. And so when we experience what that felt like, we feel boom, 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 chances are one of these are going to come to our memory. And we have that capacity. You've all walked past a house and they had the window open and they're baking some apple pie and you go, boy, it's just like Grandma's house, My kids to this day, they walk in the house, so, that's Grandma. You can smell the certain perfume and all that. Well, anyways, what we'll do is that it will take you back to a memory. And then we go in that memory much like I did, and we start seeking the truth. That's all we're going to do tonight. You can read the rest of it. I don't want to get too much here because we're going to take more time to do it. There's a lot we covered tonight, okay? But I wanted to wet your whistle. Now, do you have to work with memories? No, no one's going to force you to work with memories. Please come back. Don't panic. I'm not going to make you do anything you don't feel comfortable. But I really do believe a lot of these came out, and I've seen it. I've worked with it so many times. I've been trained in 3 or 4 different modalities of this, and I've seen it illustrated. I've seen it done so many times that it's amazing how childhood circumstances, the teenage circumstances, even young adult circumstances cause us to believe something. And then it causes this thing. And if we up here are feeling the same, we'll get back to it. And that's when we change it right there because it was a lie. And we want to go back and correct it there if we can. And it's amazing, okay? You ready for that then? We're going to keep going? Not tonight, but... All right. Now, remember, we're going to have some kind of celebration here the 20th. That's my wife's birthday. So if nothing else, I'll get her a birthday cake. But we're going to have that the 20th, all right? So I want you to start thinking. I'm going to bring her, yeah. So, yeah. So we can have a nice time together. Invite some people, right? Even if they don't want to come to the class, just say, look, I've been learning some things. We're going to talk about it, and we'll just have a good time. I'd like to see us have 100 people in here. We used to have 100 people before the pandemic came. And so anyways, invite your friends, relatives, maybe someone that will support you. They don't want to come, but they could be a real support to you, right? Maybe you're saying, yeah, I want to try this for another year. And I'd really like my spouse to see it, or my aunt prays for me or something, right? Does that make sense? And then we'll start. So, another year almost over, huh? So, Father, I thank you, Lord. I thank you for what you're teaching us. I thank you for everyone here tonight, and I thank you that you care for us. Lord, you've given us all these capacities. These things were emotionally learned. They are imaginative. They're bigger than life. We use all those facilities to keep us in shame and to keep us in fear. And Satan uses them, our own mind uses them, and they're lies, Father. And so, Lord, I pray with the power of your Holy Spirit, we'd use those same capacities that you've given us to know the truth and to know it emotionally, Father, to know who we truly, truly are, how loved we are, and how you care for us. So, Father, teach us these things, we pray, as we go through these next weeks. And we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right, yes. Janine. Yeah. Janine. Yes, the 20th, right. That's a Tuesday, right? Am I right? I think it is. Yeah, Tuesday. And then the 27th will be our first class, okay? And we question your wife about you? Huh? Oh, yeah. Did I say she was coming? All right. Thanks so much. God bless you. Good job tonight, guys. Good job.